All right, welcome to another edition of Weather and Climate Chat with Monsoon Mike Regensberger and KU meteorologist Dr. Michael Davis. Dr. Davis, welcome back again.
Here I am. Thanks for having me, as usual.
Well, we're into late October now, and things in October are always, we've been on the weather roller coaster, I guess you could say. This past week, we had temperatures deep into the 70s, but it was just a couple days prior to that we had highs some 10 degrees below normal and even some grauple. we were joking.
Grauple.
We were joking about that off the air a little bit. Well, first of all, let's talk about that. That was our first real shot at, I guess, pre-winter type weather, you could say, this past weekend.
Yeah, we had the trough in the jet stream that came in and dropped our temperatures last weekend. And we actually had our first frost in many areas. Fortunately, I didn't cover my plants, and I faced ramifications from that.
Well, it's not like we weren't prepared for it.
Yeah.
We were prepared for it, and it happened. Something interesting happened on Sunday, and maybe the weather forecasters could have done a better job, preparing for this, but they said a chance of showers on Sunday, but they didn't go into detail that the showers turned out to be grauple showers. Mm-hmm. And of course, right away, a lot of people see grauple and say it's snowing or it's hailing or it's sleeting. It's really not any of those three things. Tell us what we saw in some areas on Sunday.
Well, grauple is a type of precipitation that usually forms in these spherical structures. Usually they look like balls of ice and snow, for lack of
looks a little like sleet almost.
Yeah, and it's kind of formed in a similar fashion, but what goes on there is you have your ice crystal, which you could think about as being snow, but as it falls through the atmosphere, it encounters what's known as supercooled water, which is liquid water that is below freezing. Yes, you can have liquid water that exists below freezing temperatures.
Sure.
And as the ice crystal collides with that supercooled water, it essentially freezes directly to the ice crystal. And through the buildup of that ice, which is called rime ice, R-I-M-E ice, and the interaction with the air as it's falling, because you have air resistance, it will essentially shape it into a spherical object, and it'll fall and sometimes break upon impact. They're not really put together that efficiently, and sometimes they look like Dippin' Dots, the ice cream of the future.
Right.
You might find a baseball game or something like that. Or some people call them tapioca snow because they look like tapioca pearls that you would find in
Never
tapioca
heard that,
pudding.
but that's cool, yeah. So, yeah, that was, and it was very isolated because if you looked at radar, or scattered, I guess I should say, not isolated. If you looked at radar on Sunday afternoon, it was almost like a lake effect type picture of radar or a lake effect type feel because you saw like blotches, like popcorn blotches all over Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we had bands essentially of snow that were coming in and more or less giving us this event.
Right.
I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibilities for us to get lake effect where we are, but you really, really need to get that band set up a long distance now. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm very used to lake effect.
That's a regular day for you.
We get pounded day after day in the wintertime with lake effect snow, and I could probably fill a whole conversation about that when we start getting in maybe close to the wintertime.
Sure. Now, during one of those grauple showers, one of my fans on Monsoon Mike's Weather Headquarters sent me a picture of a rainbow, so I joked with her. I'm like, does that make it a grauple bow since it was it formed during...
I've never heard that term used before, but sure, we can go with that.
Yeah. So definitely Sunday was a very interesting day. And then this past week... 2 days later, we're deep into the 70s. So what happened there? I've got a little temporary ridge back in the area?
Yeah, the ridge moved in about Monday night into Tuesday.
Yep.
And pushed that trough pretty much off the East Coast. And it allowed temperatures to warm up into the 70s, and you had winds coming out of the south. So it was helping to add more energy to the atmosphere, and energy is what you see in the temperature. Now, the interesting feature that's going on this week right now is what we have going on across Texas with the we had a cutoff low or low pressure that got separated from the jet stream. It was kind of meandering around in the southwest U.S. for a while, and now it's starting to kick out into the Great Plains, but it's not moving very quickly, but bringing up a lot of moisture. From the Gulf of Mexico. And also we have a tropical system, Patricia, that's out in the eastern Pacific.
Right.
and going to be impacting Mexico on Saturday. And that moisture is all coming up, and now you're going to be having areas around Dallas, Austin, San Antonio. They're going to be getting probably close to a foot of rain this weekend. And not to mention coastal areas as the low starts to move a little bit closer to the Gulf, like Corpus Christi, Brownsville, Houston, Galveston. They're going to be under the gun at some point, too.
Interesting. So we had a cold front move through Thursday night, and it's now cooler and will be through the weekend. What's the trend beyond that? It looks like Sunday we warm up a little bit and then another cold front and go back down to normal again. Long range, I saw looking at the Euro yesterday, long range Euro had a pretty impressive cold shot right around Halloween. Did you see
Halloween is looking rather tumultuous right now.
Yeah. Does that storm in Texas work into this in any way?
No, that should be cleared out by that time.
So what do you mean by tumultuous?
I'm thinking more or less like there's going to be a low-pressure system impacting the Great Lakes Northeast, which is going to be bringing a cold front and a lot of moisture associated with it. We'll see exactly how cold the air wants to get. I would probably suspect the upper Great Lakes could be seeing potential snow showers.
Wow.
I don't think we're going to get any sort of cold air from this system. I think it's going to be mostly in the form of rain, but it does look stormy, so if you have kids that are going trick-or-treating, it's probably good to make sure they have an umbrella or poncho or raincoat. Over their costume, of course.
See, in my
area,
what
I always had to do when I was a kid.
Right, me too. See, in my area where I grew up in a little town outside of Philadelphia, it was always trick-or-treating was always on Halloween, whether it was no matter what day Halloween was. But in my town, if Halloween falls like on a Friday or a Saturday because of like high school football games, and they say for safety reasons, they have a million excuses, they move it back a couple days. So our trick-or-treat is actually Thursday. So I'm thinking we should be okay Thursday, it looks like. It doesn't look like it gets really crazy until afterwards.
Yeah, until like the actual weekend is
Right.
when things start to go toward the wet side of the scale. I will stress, though, that this is 9 days out, and this is a long-term outlook.
Right.
It's not anything set in stone or
Sure.
home about or starting to panic about, oh, my goodness, what's going to happen to the children.
Right, exactly.
We got plenty of time for the models to resolve themselves, but this
Sure.
is what we're seeing right now.
And we discussed that last week. The models are generally very good at temperatures, but sometimes other things not quite as perfect with. But that Euro yesterday was pretty impressive with it being pretty darn chilly by this time next week. Do you kind of see that happening?
The temperatures are going to be dropping.
Yeah.
I've only seen like 50s, maybe upper 40s at the worst. But then we get back into the mid-50s by next week. So I think we're going to be more or less around seasonal temperatures, which are about 60 degrees for most of the area right about now.
I guess it's all kind of like a relative thing. We've had such a mild spell that anything that's normal or a little below feels, whoa, this is cold.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
So we should be – this is actually seasonal temperatures. Right now it's well above average as we're talking earlier this week before our taping.
Right.
But – this weekend will probably be more seasonable.
Right. So we're used to that. Okay. Sounds good. So, and getting into fall colors, everything's just sort of blossomed almost overnight. We're, I guess, kind of close to peak now, you would say?
Yeah, I'd probably say we're getting there. And maybe we're a few days, another week off from peak, but we are darn close to a pretty good display right about now. Yeah,
especially just north of here. If you want to do some leaf peeking this weekend, where I live in Schuylkill County, it's pretty much about 100%. Down here, it's maybe 75, 80%, but it's coming close.
Depending on where you are.
Right, it's very localized.
More or less around the entire area, it's pretty much color season right now.
Yeah, so definitely good times to get out and do that before the leaves are all gone. When do we normally see the leaves start to really the trees really start to become bare? Like first few weeks of November, mid-November?
Yeah, I would probably venture to say that's about the time you would see most of the leaves down. But that could also depend on climate conditions like moisture and temperature.
I was going to say probably something that's just as silly and simple as how windy it is or how rainy it is over those first few weeks of November. Because the wind and rain tend to do a job on the leaves.
Or if we get snow,
that'll
bring down the leaves fast too.
Yeah, we're approaching the 4-year anniversary of the pre-Halloween storm of 2011. Were you in the area when that happened?
I just entered the region, but I was away during that
Oh,
weekend.
you missed it. Too
Yeah,
bad.
but then when I came back, it was practically all gone. That was
Yeah, it
like,
melted.
What happened?
Well, that's typical for that time of year, but the effects lingered for quite a while. And there were some people without power deep into November. I
and
remember
we're also
that.
getting close to the 3-year anniversary of Sandy.
Yes. Yeah, those two were in a row. I mean, 2011 was the snowstorm. 2012 was Sandy. I remember people joking in 2013, what's going to happen in 2013? A volcano, the end of the world? But no, we got through 2013 fairly quietly.
Yes.
Yeah, but October can be a very tumultuous month, as we've seen.
And that all brings about from the jet streams
Right.
fluctuations because of the loss in insulation, about how much energy the Earth's receiving now as the sun angle's going down. And you just have that differential in temperature, which is causing the jet stream to wildly move about, going to its winter position further south of here, which allows the colder air to impact us more readily.
Right. Long range, we've talked about this in weeks past, but it's always good to touch base on it again for anybody new just listening for the first time. How are we looking into November? Because by the time we talk next time, we'll almost be in November already.
As far as I know, it looks like average temperatures.
Average.
And I haven't seen anything precipitation-wise
Okay.
that looks out of the ordinary. So it looks pretty much like your standard November in terms of temperature and
Okay.
precipitation.
Maybe even a little above, a couple degrees above or
Yeah.
standard to above.
Yeah.
'Cause that's just been the trend all year. One thing that I did see that was rather concerning and going to a more global perspective, I saw one of the climate sites that I subscribe to say that we just got done some of the hottest months on Earth. It's pretty scary. I mean, you look at that map and it's all red except for a couple little blobs of blue.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it does look like 2015 is already leading for the warmest year on record.
Wow.
It just seems like every year we
Have
set
a
new
warmest year on record.
We just keep obliterating all these records, and it just seems like we're in an upward trend of temperatures throughout most of the globe.
Yeah, and that is definitely concerning. And you can attribute that. Do we attribute that to climate change? Obviously, we are going through cycles as well, but I guess we could say it's partially due to climate change as well too.
I certainly would attribute it to
Yeah,
climate change.
absolutely.
This, year after year, perpetual increase in temperature, resulting in new records after new records of warmer temperatures. Now, that's not to say the entire globe is seeing warmer temperatures.
No, not always.
But most of them are, and most of that warming is occurring at the poles, which is resulting in loss of sea ice, which then messes with the actual heating differential between the dark ocean versus the more reflective ice and snow.
Right.
And then you get wild change in temperature, you get more extremes, you get more in the way of just random extreme temperature storms and so forth.
Gotcha. Well, we'll just have to keep an eye on that and see where that goes. Final minute or two. It's always good. We didn't really plug it last week too much because we were short on time, but plug your website and I'll plug mine, your Facebook page. You do a great job. You're a little more technical than me, so talk a little bit about that.
Michael Davis's weather forecasts.
Okay.
I usually have more of a scientific aspect to it and talk about 2 days out worth of weather, and if there's any sort of interesting climate news or local climatology for the region, like I talked about the recent cold snap and how we saw the third earliest occurrence of 25 degrees Fahrenheit in Allentown
Interesting.
on record. And
I
the
didn't
other
even
two
hear that stat, but
were
that's
from
interesting.
the 30s and like 1937 and 1964, I believe. Sometime in the mid-60s, sometime in the late 30s. I forget the exact date and year, but we had a very early occurrence of that. And sometimes I just put up any sort of educational information, like I talked about vorticity, talked about convergence, talked about upstream versus downstream in the atmosphere. So it's more of a scientific viewpoint.
Cool. So that's interesting. So we go from, I didn't hear that stat. So we go from one of the hottest Septembers on record to the third earliest 25 degrees on record.
That exactly highlights the extreme cases that
Right.
we're talking about here.
So I think that we're in for a roller coaster for the rest of the fall and for winter, but that's what makes our jobs interesting, right?
Yes, it does.
All right. And check out my page, Monsoon Mike's Weather Headquarters, for, I'm a little more of the less scientific, more of the more social type feel, I like to equate myself to the more social, congenial version of the National Weather Service's forecast discussion, which sometimes gets a little over my head sometimes. And I think you even said that as well, too, even though they do a
Yeah.
great job.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, but sometimes it's a little like, Wow. Okay, if that's a public statement, how? What?
I have my students try to read through a forecast discussion from the National Weather Service, and oftentimes I have to pretty much translate the entire thing for them.
And it's interesting because I've noticed that sometimes different offices have totally different writing styles. Like I live in southern Schuylkill County, so I'm literally right on the border of the State College office versus the Mount Holly office. So I read both every day. And it seems like the State College guys sometimes are even more difficult to read than the Mount Holly guys who try to dumb it down a little bit. So,
Yeah.
and I say that in a good way. But the State College guys, it's like, wow, what was that? I got to read that 3 times again.
But then again, you're talking about National Weather Service,
Right.
who's trying to convey this information to the public. So
Right.
it helps, I think, if you're more basic,
Right,
rather than
right.
throwing scientific jargon at people.
Right. But fun stuff nonetheless anyway. Well, thanks so much, Dr. Michael Davis. We will reconvene again next week as we approach perhaps what we're thinking might be a rather busy time weather-wise.
Yes.
So we'll see you then.